So we have 5 state representatives with us tonight that we want to welcome back home, out of Austin, back where they belong. Come on up. You guys would come on up. We have, come on up, all of you. Is this fantastic or what? So I'm just going to tell you who they are really quick in case you don't know. And then we're going to start with these two and then on the end, okay? So the 3 of you will go first and then we'll have the 2 of you go because I've asked Jonathan and Rinaldi to say a little bit more. But we have Stephanie Click, Matt Rinaldi, who we've kind of adopted him. He's not Northeast Tarrant, but we love him anyway. We have Jonathan Sticklin, Matt Krause, and Tony Tinderholt out of Arlington, another one we've adopted. So they're going to give us quick reviews of what they did personally, and then Rinaldi's going to talk about what did pass, and Sticklin's going to talk about what didn't pass. So as fast as you can.
Well, a couple of things that I worked on this session. One was a bill for kids that have epilepsy, intractable epilepsy. Many of you may know Marie Howard. She has a granddaughter that has something called Dravet syndrome, and it's one of the most difficult forms of epilepsy to treat. Many of the medications, there are not any FDA-approved medications for that. We now, the governor signed my bill on Monday. We had a 2/3 support in both the House and the Senate, so it goes into effect immediately. And we estimate that there are 150,000 Texans with intractable epilepsy that this could potentially help. For those of you that may not know, it's an extract of the cannabis plant, but it is non-euphoric. It has no street value. It's not something you get high on, but it's had tremendous impact on children, particularly that have intractable seizures that nothing else seems to help. The other bill that I was very involved in was some end-of-life legislation. I have been working this particular issue for about 12 years before I was even in the legislature. And we established a bill this session that is going to have some reforms regarding nutrition and hydration. Texas has one of the most onerous laws on the books. I do want to work more for additional reforms, but after trying for 12 years, I'm proud to say that there are more protections for people that are in hospitals. The other thing that I accomplished was Infectious Disease Task Force. Y'all all remember Ebola came to Texas first, and my bill is going to keep the task force permanent. We learned that the federal government did not give us very good advice last time, and that we need to be prepared because we're just a airplane trip away from another emerging disease coming to Texas. So those are 3 things that I worked on this session. All of them have passed, and they're waiting for the governor's signature.
Yeah, Stephanie did a great job, and I think, Stephanie, were you one of the top 10 or honorable mention from Capitol Inside most was it influential legislators of the session? So I thought that was a pretty great accomplishment for Stephanie. There's another one here who was named one of the top 10 influential people, but I'll let you guess who that was. He's a little quiet, so he probably wouldn't tell you that himself. But Jonathan, but it was an honor serving with these guys again down in Austin this past session. I want to especially thank my wife and my 4 kids who are back there for all the sacrifice that they put in to allow me to be here. But you know what? We were able to get some things accomplished this session as well. On the pro-life end, there was an issue I've been working on since I got into the legislature, which was tightening up the judicial bypass laws, whereby a lot of times these girls find themselves in situations that they're scared, they don't know what's going on, and there's these people who look to get them through a process where they don't have to get parental notification or consent for an abortion. They send them through the judicial process, and a judge can order and approve of the abortion without the parents even knowing. And so I spent a lot of time this session strengthening that and closing some of those loopholes that were being exploited through the process. And Jeannie Morrison carried a bill similar to mine, and hers made it to the floor. We were able to add 4 substantive amendments to really strengthen and tighten those laws. So I was proud that that got through and that got signed, or will be signed by the governor pretty soon. We also had another bill, House Bill 3387, which would allow which would make sure that sex offenders are monitored and heavily watched once they get out of prison, even if they weren't convicted of a crime of a sexual nature. And so you have to go through a process. There has to be due process. There has to be hearing and evidence. But this will keep our community safer from these people who, on technicalities or plea bargains or some kind of issue, they were not charged with a sexual crime, but now, because of the nature of the crime, they will be forced to be watched and be monitored as they should be. And then we had some local bills that got through, but we also had a bill on it's called a decriminalization commission, and we've actually got 1,500 criminal laws outside of the penal code. So our penal code is all of our criminal laws. We actually have 1,500 laws that you can go to jail for outside the penal code. And I had a bill that would establish a commission that would allow us to go look through those the next year and a half and come back with recommendations to repeal, to get rid of, to erase a lot of those laws. I was able to amend that to a bill that got passed, and that will be going to the governor's desk as well. Minnesota did that just about a year ago, and they got rid of 1,100 laws in one day. And I'm looking forward to authoring the legislation that does that or more this next session, in the 85th session. So we were able to do a lot of things, and Rinaldi will tell you a little bit more about what else we accomplished, but just personally, the ones I was involved in, that's what we did. And I'll say, Matt, it may have been mentioned or it will be mentioned, but the guy he beat last session just came out and announced that he's running against him today. I can't imagine the Texas House now without Matt Rinaldi in it. He was an unbelievable addition, just a tenacious fighter for the things that y'all believe in. So I know, even though, like Julie said, he's not in Northeast Tarrant, I think we ought to marshal the troops as much as possible to help and make sure that he gets back. So thanks for your support. Thanks for allowing me to be here tonight. God bless you guys.
I'm pretty fortunate to follow the footsteps of the 3 sophomores here. We learned quite a bit from them, and I just want to say thank you for your mentorship. I got to sit with this guy. It turned out pretty good sitting with Jonathan. I got a few things done this session. The first thing we did was we added an amendment to the border security bill that helped solidify human trafficking, continuous human trafficking, which also increased the penalties for that. I got a couple of amendments on the budget. They ended up getting stripped out, but one was to provide a long-term solution for TRS care for retired teachers. That ended up getting stripped out, but we voted on it during budget night and we won that. The other one that we got on the floor of a vote to 135-4 was concerning fingerprints. If you go to DPS and you get your fingerprints taken, all 10, they go into APHIS database, a criminal database, and you're run against crimes. I thought that was unconstitutional. Some other people had fought the fight before I got there. I just kind of got to help be at the end and fight, but a whole bunch of legislators, pun intended here, had their fingerprints in it, and it ended up getting passed, and I'll tell you how. We got it on the budget. It ended up getting stripped out. I was very fortunate to be able to pass a bill for one of my best friends who was a police officer in Austin that got killed. We named a highway after him. That was pretty touching. And then...
Wait. You need to tell these fiscal conservatives that no public dollars went to the renaming. Y'all actually raised the money from private sources to rename the highway. That is a big accomplishment as well.
Yeah, he was killed in the line of duty, and we got the police associations to pay for the signs. It was great for the family. It was a feel-good, warm and fuzzy. We had all 150 members up at the front mic with us when we passed it. Now, my fingerprint bill died in committee because the chairman had another bill that they wanted to get passed where they could do all 10 fingerprints. To come full circle, the bill got killed in committee. Some transportation funding was on the House floor, and the former Speaker Craddock added on texting with driving ban. Well, I called a point of order, which was sustained, and I killed the bill, which essentially killed texting while driving. The Senate did a good job of killing it as well. We killed that amendment, but at the same time, former Speaker Craddock held up an amendment that said, Tony Tinderholt, we're going to take $390 million from Arlington transportation funding if you do this. That didn't scare me. It frustrated me. It angered me. And I said, this is what's wrong with DC politics, and I'm not withdrawing my amendment. I looked at the Speaker and said, rule on my point of order, and it killed the bill. So what happened was we killed texting while driving. We also killed $290 million in federal funding. However, when you have friends over on the Senate side, they come back around the back door and they take care of business. They added the $290 million back into 1888. They also added my fingerprint bill in. And the moral of the story, the very end is, the person that blocked my fingerprint bill in committee voted yes on the amendment, not knowing it was there. And 3 days later, was at the front mic telling everyone that I killed $290 million. I had to get on the mic and remind him, that bill you voted for, 1888, yeah, that added the 290 back in as well. So the full circle, they were killing it in committee. We came back around with the help of some folks. They're like, pun intended, but there were a lot of fingerprints involved, and I appreciate the help of everybody from both the House and the Senate side. Can't get anything done there without building relationships. And I don't know if you guys saw, Tony Tinderholt's going to be off the rails, going to be crazy. I'll tell you what, I built some really, really good relationships with people on both sides of the aisle, but I want to make sure everyone understands I never changed my principled stance. We all voted no on everything that you guys would have voted no on. So building those relationships didn't change my votes. We just built rapport and built relationships with people, and we proved them wrong. We got some things done for Texans while we built rapport and political equity there on the House floor. So thank you to you guys for all your help as well.
Thank you all for having me today. Thank you for adopting me into your group, even though I'm from Dallas County. I just want to add to what the three people you've heard from already have said. They had talked about direct influence, direct filing of bills. Like Reagan said, it's amazing what you can do when you don't care who gets the credit. Each of these people was behind so much and so many floor maneuvers where other people got the credit, but it was really them. And you don't realize the amount of influence that each individual up here has had in the state legislature and how much we have to keep all of them there. It's been my pleasure to fight with everybody, to fight the establishment with every single person on this stage. Sometimes, in the case of Jonathan and me, we have literally fought the establishment in Austin, but it's really been my pleasure. Some of the things we have done this session, let me just first say, as of Monday of last week, you are safe from the legislative branch of the Texas government for the next 18 months. We had, compared to previous sessions, a good legislative session with the qualifier compared to previous sessions. And we did that because you guys worked so hard to get great conservatives like this in office who fought like caged animals in order to fight for conservative causes in the House where everything was stacked against us. Also, we had a conservative Senate led by a conservative lieutenant governor, and I can't underscore enough how much that helped. The conservative Senate was out there fighting. We were fighting in the House, sometimes against crazy odds. And let me just tell you one particular thing. When we thought the odds were against us and we'd have a vote that would be 140 to 5 sometimes, we'd be outvoted in the House and think we didn't make a difference. I had talked to a colleague of mine, and I said, how's your bill going? It passed 140 to 6 in the House. And he said, can't get it through the Senate. Why? Well, because you, Stickland, Krause, and Tinderholt voted against it, and all the senators want to know why you guys voted against it. They won't vote for it. Now, I'm going to tell you what did pass. And like I said, better than previous sessions, not acceptable when you consider that we have 98 House Republicans, 20 Senate Republicans, and we had a very conservative Senate, and the product of the Senate was very conservative. First of all, we passed a fiscally conservative budget that everybody on this stage voted for. That was the biggest surprise of session going into session. Didn't think I'd be a green light on the budget, but that's one thing that we should be thankful for. The budget, thanks to the Senate, limits all funds and state funds to increases in state funds and all funds to inflation plus population growth. There was about a 4% increase in government. Inflation, population growth 6.5, which means the real size of government did not grow. Big victory. We included $800 million to secure the border. This does not mean we have a secure border. However, the border is more secure than it was before, significantly. However, the resources towards border security are aimed mainly at the drug cartels and crime at the border. This will affect illegal immigration to the extent that most of the illegal immigration right now is driven by the drug cartels, and hitting them in their primary business will likely have an effect on their secondary business. However, it's not everything we need to do, and Jonathan will talk to you about that later. Third, the budget increases public school funding by $1.5 billion over enrollment growth, significantly less than the House had originally put in there. Fourth, no rainy day fund use, unlike the previous session. We leave a surplus of around $6 billion off the controller's previous projections at the beginning of session. That might not end up to materialize because of oil prices, but we will see. Included in the budget, $3.6 billion in cuts to property tax and the franchise tax. I'll let you clap before I tell you how we got there, which might not make you clap. So the House passed $4.9 billion in cuts to sales tax and property and franchise tax. The Senate passed $4.6 billion in cuts to the franchise tax and the property tax. So what do you get as a compromise when one has 4.9 and the other has 4.6? You get 3.6 billion in tax cuts somehow. So a victory because we're cutting taxes. However, don't know how we got to that number. It's a cut in the specifics are we cut the margins tax by 25% and raise the ISD homestead exemption from $15,000 to $25,000. The biggest loss in the tax cuts in the compromise was we didn't include the Senate indexing of the increase in the homestead exemption for property values going in the future. Pro-life victories. We passed HB 3074, which strengthened protections for end-of-life care, prohibits physicians from withholding food or water from a patient undergoing life-sustaining treatment without the consent of the patient or a surrogate. HB 3994, which Representative Krause had touched on before, his amendment made that bill as strong as it needs to be. And that was a great victory for the life cause that Representative Krause was at the forefront of. Let me just say, in order to get Representative Krause's amendment in the final bill, and in order to get the 4 of the 5 amendments that we put in the final bill, we had to hold the line. Representative Krause, Representative Leach, Representative Sticklin, Representative Schofield from Houston, myself, we all had input into this bill, and we had amendments pending. Immediately, the establishment tried to get us to pull our amendments. They wanted to deal with the Democrats and pass a weaker bill. But it's because everybody held out, had backbone, that we got a stronger bill. At one point, Sticklin can tell you, there was a huddle on the floor of about 50 Republicans all nervous. And every once in a while, one of them would come out from the huddle and try to get me to pull my amendment, and I would say no, and then they'd huddle back and figure out what to do. And then afterwards, we were meeting with one of the life groups, and Representative Sticklin said, yeah, we got a good final passage. He goes, I think the tide turned when Rinaldi told him he'd have to slit his throat before he pulled his amendment. But we got it in. We got 4 or 5 amendments in. Very, very strong bill on judicial bypass for the life cause. Second Amendment protections. We got open carry passed and campus carry passed. I'll let you clap, then I'll give you the bad news. We're the 45th state to pass open carry and the 31st state to pass campus carry. The open carry bill is a licensed open carry bill. There's an amendment that I introduced in the House along with Representative Dutton that Representative Huffines introduced to the Senate got passed by large bipartisan margins in both the House and the Senate, which would prohibit the police from randomly stopping people with a visible handgun for no reason other than they had a visible handgun. It was stripped by a small group of legislators at the last minute and left out of the final bill despite passage, I think, a combined 152 to, I think it was 152 to 21 in both houses. So we're not having as strong of an open carry bill as we can have. Hopefully we'll revisit constitutional carry in the next session. Campus carry, in the end, the Senate passed a very strong campus carry bill. The House passed a watered down bill. We ended up getting essentially what the House passed. What the Senate passed is a bill saying that colleges, with very few exceptions, have to allow carry on campus. What the House passed is something saying that colleges have to implement campus carry. However, the Board of Trustees can designate places where guns are not allowed. And then we will review that in 2 years. So essentially, what the House passed and what was passed was campus carry is allowed, you need to implement it. If you don't implement campus carry, we might make you in 2 years. Not as strong as it needs to be, but nevertheless, still passed. We thought it was dead for a little bit. Other than that, real quick, just we passed a couple other important bills. HB 283 requires governmental bodies to make audio and video recordings of open meetings available online. We passed the Pastor Protection Act, which protects religious organizations' right to deny marriage services. If they violate their religious beliefs. We finally took the Public Integrity Unit out of the hands of the Travis County VA. And we passed one of the bills that I wanted to point to is Senate Bill 652, which is an extremely important bill that pushes back on the Obama's National Labor Relations Board decision, which tries to make franchisors responsible for lawsuits by franchisee employees, which I got to rewrite and actually get passed when it was held up in my committee. The one bill I can point to that has a wide-reaching effect that I can say would not have passed but for my efforts. I'm very proud of that bill. And that's a general overview. Representative Stickland will tell you what didn't get passed, and a lot of what didn't get passed, which you probably won't cover, is a lot of stuff that we killed. That was absolutely terrible legislation, like a $15,000 per month insurance mandate on restaurant and bars that we killed, like bills that would impose unfunded mandates on our school systems and increase the government regulation of the sale of precious metals. So now I'll leave it to the great Representative Jonathan Stickland.
At the end of session, the day before we sine died, the Republican caucus leader came around and he had a ballot for Republican Caucus Freshman Member of the Year. And I'm sitting there looking at it and trying to decide between Tinderholt and Rinaldi, because those two guys were the superstars of the session. Both of them exceeded every expectation that I had and hoped for reinforcements. Tony Tinderholt was a constant guy who would never back down. Matt Rinaldi is one of the smartest people that I've ever had the chance to work with. It was truly an honor. So I get to bring the bad news. One of the things, and Matt kind of hinted on this, there were 48 bills on the local and consent calendar that did not pass because of the efforts of some of the folks here. That included things like mandating that animal shelters could not euthanize an animal. Which, from an animal lover perspective, if you put any thought behind it, we had veterinarians all across the state calling in, begging us to stop this, because what it would do is it would force animal shelters and their limited resources to have to hold on to animals that are sick or dying or unadoptable, and really that's almost taking the life away from an animal that could have a chance. So we stopped that. We stopped a bill by Representative Pickett that would have given police powers of search, seizure, and arrest to a private security guard of the Federal Reserve Bank. That did not pass. So that's good. But I want to talk about some of the conservative legislation and why I have rated this session a C+, because there were a lot of good things that came about. The budget process, honestly, I can tell you I never thought that I would vote yes on a budget. This one was a good budget that I feel good about. HB 13 was a transportation funding project for TxDOT and local transportation entities. After they killed the red light camera bill, very out in the open, which I'm sure some of you may have heard about, Senator Hall actually got a ban of red light cameras statewide onto HB 13. And Representative Pickett so wanted red light cameras in the state of Texas that he called a point of order on his own bill and killed it. HB 13 was a good conservative bill that died because it had a ban on red light cameras. Another thing, we talked about border security. Let me tell you what we didn't do. We didn't address illegal immigration at all. We did not touch anything that had to do with magnets that were attracting people here. We're still paying for illegals college tuition in the state of Texas. We still have sanctuary cities all across the state of Texas. Every single bill that came to the floor or was even filed, it was like a memo almost went out to every member that don't waste your time, we're not going to deal with it. So other than the extra money that we provided for DPS, which was a good idea, we did nothing to stop the actual source of the problem, which are the magnets and the taxpayer subsidies and the handouts that these folks are coming here to get. And we will never stop this problem until we deal with that issue. We dealt with none of it. Pro-life legislation, HB 575, was a wonderful pro-life bill that at the end of the session, many of us had been working on for a very long time. It died on the House floor. Spending limits, proposed and failed, SB 9 by Senator Hancock, would have limited the growth of government to no more than the growth of population and inflation. This measure passed the Senate and was supported by the Lieutenant Governor Patrick, and it was gutted on the House floor by Representative Otto and died. Ethics reform, SB 19, passed over in the Senate. This would have brought so much more light to Austin. And what did the people in the House decide to do with it? Hijack it. It became this omnibus bill for them to go after every single conservative organization that the rhinos and the liberals who run as Republicans could go after. They slapped on things that shatter the First Amendment, that shatter the Fourth Amendment, things that would have never been constitutional. There was one that took the ability to record someone from a one-party to a two-party, which means both parties have to consent to being recorded. Which, let me tell you something, from a reporting standpoint, you think we've got bad liberal media right now. Wait till politicians get to give their approval on whether something goes out or not. It was an absolute atrocity. And it was directed specifically at pro-life groups, conservative groups, Tea parties, and everybody that we support in this room specifically against. So SB 19 died. The other thing that died was American law for American courts. That was something that had been streamlined. Voters talked to us about it all the time. This should have been a slam dunk easy one for the House to deal with. It was torpedoed in the Calendars Committee at the very end by no other than Republicans. In fact, the lady who was the deciding vote on the American Law for American Courts bill was actually a co-sponsor of the same bill. So she signed on in support of the bill so that she could get credit with the grassroots. But then when it got close to actually hitting the floor, she sent the torpedo to kill it. Debbie Riddle from Houston. And I'm being told that she's got quite a challenger in the next election cycle. There were a number of different bills. Constitutional carry, which is something obviously I am very passionate about, never got a hearing. And I will tell you, most of the people who stood up and demanded conservative leadership for the speaker's chair at the very start of session, all of our bills were specifically targeted. We had to work 10 times harder to get anything through. Representative Click and Krause, I think, were two of the only people who were actually successful in those efforts to get their stuff through. It was a dogfight down in Austin. Every single inch that we got, we fought tooth and nail for. And it was very, very depressing for me watching the Senate at the very start go straight to work and pump out those priority bills, 1 through 20, one after another, after another, after another. And watching the House leadership literally micromanage the process from calendars to committees to hearings and everything else in between to set up situations where we would run out of time. I kept telling people that some of the freshmen in February and March were saying, oh, well, this job's actually pretty easy. We don't do much around here. And I told them, I said, make no mistake about it, there's a lot happening right now. And it's conservative legislation that's dying on purpose. So we've got a lot of work to do. We're going to come out with a comprehensive list of these and many other conservative reforms that were out there on the table, ready to go, with the support of Texans all across this state that died. And we're going to hold them accountable. So thank y'all very much.
Okay, thank you to all 5 of you that gave us that overview, review, I guess. A couple things I want to say before we bring up our guest speaker. First of all, her presentation is like several hours long, and we've asked her to squeeze it into 1 hour. So we're running about 15 minutes late tonight, and we're not going to ask her to cut that short for us. So if you do need to leave right at 8 o'clock, I'm just going to ask you to very quietly leave through the very back door, okay? But I don't think you're going to want to leave because what she's going to say is going to be good. The second thing is, if you went to the statewide rally in Austin on tax day, and you know who was passing out the t-shirts, we need to know who that person was. I have no idea. I had a million things going on that day, but we need to get a hold of that person. So if you got a t-shirt and you remember who handed it to you, please let me know. And the third thing